Apple time.
So we should be live, and mics are also live. So Deputy Mayor, at your convenience.
All right, call to order this Riverside City Council work session at 6 PM. Madam Secretary,
We're
call.
going to pledge first?
Oh, we're doing pledge first, okay.
Yes.
Go ahead and start the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes. Now we do the roll.
Yeah, Madam Secretary, can you go ahead and call the roll, or Council Clerk, not Secretary? Catherine.
Mr. Brown?
Here?
Mr. Denning?
Here.
Ms. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomatch?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Here.
Mayor Williams?
Move to excuse.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Lomach. Any, did you get it?
Yeah, I've got it.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Any opposed?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Mr. Manager, any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No, Deputy Mayor.
Move to
All right.
approve.
Do I have a second?
I didn't hear it.
Moved and approved by
I heard the
Council.
first, I didn't hear the second.
I haven't heard a second.
Second.
Mr. Brown? Got it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. All, any opposed? All right. All right, we'll go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Manager.
All right. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Mhm.
So first on the agenda, we have a couple monthly updates from Finance, Administration, and Community Development. And I'll start with the Finance Department. If Ms. Baker wants to, whoops, here I've already clicked the wrong camera view on our live stream. We need to go to that one. So Ms. Baker, at your convenience.
Well, we've had an exciting week in finance. It's year end, so there's lots of stuff going on. We had to update payroll with the new FOP contract, and that was pretty time consuming, but we have started reconciliations for last year, so hopefully we can get those wrapped up. I've been in contact with our IPA, who compiles our financials. They're asking for stuff already, so that's exciting. Not being facetious. We set up tax assistance schedules with CCA. Those will be posted online shortly. And we have taken over the Right Point accounting, so we have started billing leases and paying invoices for that. They used to do, Colliers used to do that for us, but in '24, we'll take that back. And then as far as year-end goes, we had to close out last year as far as POs go and set up new POs with the departments. And we just want to thank all the departments for all their help.
Yeah, I'll just add briefly to that. We're doing a little bit of a different process. In the past, we've historically used a lot of blanket POs, which there are some advantages to using a blanket PO. One of the disadvantages is it makes it kind of harder to determine where the money's going. So what we're doing this year is making a very deliberate effort to set up a PO for a specific vendor so that it's easier to tell what money is actually encumbered for in the system as we roll through the year. So it's a little bit more work for the departments because they actually have to go through and enter what are they going to buy and who they're going to buy it from if they know that in advance. But the end product will be worth it. It's better control, better accountability. And to Ms. Baker's point, we do appreciate all the work that all the departments have done because it has been a bit of a learning curve. But we have the tools in the system to do it, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. So
So, for clarity, blankets now, are those just for, like, ordinary expenditures, like office supplies, things that, like, you're gonna pay a vendor X amount of dollars recurring throughout the year? So they're not being used for, like, one-off major purchases?
correct. So any sort of minor vehicle repair, oil change, pens, pencils, that kind of stuff goes on a blanket.
Right.
Anything substantive goes on its own PO.
Perfect.
If there are no more questions for Ms. Baker, just a quick update in administration, which is related. So I have been working in ClearGov on narratives for our popular budget book, the readable one. It has a lot more prettier charts and graphs than what we normally pass at the budget adoption every year. So I'm through all the fund summaries. I'm halfway through the departments, and then I have a short summary section that I'll draft that will read similarly to what I produced last year. that was just sort of a Word document. Then I'll have the staff go through and look at it, just to have extra eyes, and then I'll have a draft in front of you all as well. So end of the month, a couple more weeks, we should be at a good place to have that in front of you, and then I'll ask you to adopt it eventually through a resolution. Again, it will be, the numbers will be the same as what we adopted in December. So there's no changes to the budget. This is just the exhibit we will use to talk about it. And in a few more months, once we start the budget process for 2025, we'll basically be able to copy and paste this version and pull all our new numbers in and have a book ready much more quickly, I anticipate. So that's all I have in administration. And Ms. Holt in community development, and I think you have a PowerPoint. Is that correct? So let me do some magic here. So new system, wrong keyboard. So I'll pull this up, and then we'll actually put it on the, where am I? There I go. Slideshow. So we'll start that. Can you, oops. Is that clicker working? If you try to go back, it might need to be turned on. Oh, it's on the side, sorry. Yes, no, maybe. There you go. Try one more time. If you go back to the beginning. Can you see?
No.
Oh, you can't see up there. Wow, all right, so trial by fire. Actually, this is why. This is why. Now you should be able to see. All right,
All right.
thank you for bearing with us. Take it away, Ms. Holt.
All right. So for my update, I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what happened last year. Good evening. I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what happened last year, some numbers, and also just a little look of what we're hoping to happen and what will happen, we're going to speak positively, for 2024. So just to hit some of the highlights of what we're really proud of, as you know, we adopted the One Riverside Comprehensive Plan. That was a huge effort for many of our partners in the community. Residents came out, as you can see in this picture, to give their input, and it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for everybody coming together to make that plan a reality. We also passed 5 zoning code updates this past year. We launched our citizen portal so that residents can submit applications online. We have that up and running, and it's been going smoothly for the most part. We're still working on it, but we're glad to have that option available for our residents. We had 2 undergrad interns this year, or this past year. Both are interested in working in the public sector. We're really proud of these young ladies and can't wait to see what they do in the future. We have the CRA Housing Council established, and staff was represented at all levels, local, state, and national, at different conferences. Lori spoke at a Jobs Ohio conference in Columbus, which really puts Riverside on the map on what we're doing. I was able to speak at the National Planning Conference and at the local planning workshop this year. So we're really wanting people to see that Riverside's here, we're growing, and don't count us out. So this is the permits that we took this year. Just wanted to give you a snapshot and see how it's changed over the past few years. It's fallen off a little bit from last year, but I think this is kind of the levels we're going to see. About 400 permits, the zoning permits coming in, a little bit of planning commission at 20. We get a lot more of those than we do the variances. I think with the zoning changes that are happening, this number could fall again. With our boards and commissions, you won't see everything that you saw those numbers here. There were some that were withdrawn. With BZA, they approved 7. Planning Commission approved 10. You can see the numbers with our Housing Council newly established. 1 recommended approval. Again, we have changes with our code, so property maintenance did not hear any cases last year. That's good to hear. And code enforcement. We were working really hard this year, or this past year. 15 public nuisance determinations. 9 of those properties were boarded up. 3 of those structures were demolished. Some of that was laying the groundwork for 2024, so we can get those properties on the list that can be demolished and working with the land bank to get those properties moving forward so we can deal with some of these blighted structures. We created an extension form to help those who do have code violations formally request those, say what they need, the timeframe they're looking for, and we can have that really outlined clearly in that application or that form process. The citizen portal is also a place where our residents can view code cases. If they have questions that they saw a property that doesn't look quite right, they can see, is that a case that we already have ongoing? You can also see our stats from last year. These were the top 10 violations that we had from last year. A lot of grass, a lot of junk vehicles and just outside storage, people parking on grass. I'm sure as you drive around, you're not surprised that these are our top 10. And in economic development, I want to say this first one, that number is small because we only counted the ones that are currently open and obtain permits. So that is the important thing.
So
Having
completely open, in other
completely
words,
open
yeah.
and have permits.
Yep.
So that's why that number is 12. These are the grants that our department obtained. That first one, the Ohio Department of Development, that is the one that allowed us to take down 4032 Linden. And we have a few more properties that are going to be coming down this year, but we were awarded that grant last year. The Jobs Ohio one, that is the project that Lori worked on and was able to speak. They're really excited to see what we can do in this corridor and really get it started with the Springfield aligned with the comprehensive plan, and that's just the first step to get that rolling. With the EPA grant and some others, it's really just moving us forward in little projects, so that's why those numbers are smaller. Lori also worked quarterly, monthly on just making sure she's plugged in into the different networks around our community and other economic development efforts. It's not on here, but she also did business visits in our source water protection area after we adopted those changes to our regulations to make sure those businesses knew that they were, one, in the source water protection area, and two, that those changes had been made. So, looking ahead to this year, we really want to get that zoning code rewrite off the ground. That's something we're really excited to start working towards. Expanding our staff in the Community Development Department, looking to launch the rental registration, participating in the Water Festival, which is a part of the Source Water Protection Program. It's been a while, but we're working with Mad River Schools to make sure those fourth graders are part of that festival for next year. So excited to see that happen. And there's going to be some future development because, like I said, we're moving. A few that we know are probably going to happen this year are listed up there. So that's just a few things that we're looking forward to. Sorry, I know I was trying to respect your time on that one.
No, this is great.
It's great.
Any questions for Naya?
Taco John's, have we heard of?
yeah.
It's a great question.
Yes, I get that a lot, but I have not heard when they are breaking ground. They could break ground. They have all their permits through building. They have all their permits through us. So it's really up to their team when they're ready to move forward.
Okay.
And where exactly is that going again?
That is going to go in front of Youthland.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I might add that you want to tell them where we were today? And I found out from several of the young people down there that are involved with development and whatever that attended the conference that Naya was a presenter. Heard several comments about what a good job she did and in representing us quite well. And these young girls have got a lot to learn. She's got a lot to share, so. And I was happy she went today. You want to tell them a little bit about where we were today?
Of course. Today, MVRPC in All Aboard, Ohio, hosted a workshop about the rail system that is being considered in this quarter. It's the 3CD corridor that they're looking at, the connection, and that is the Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. And so they were outlining the steps it would take to make that a reality and how the communities who are in that corridor could get involved.
Awesome.
And we're going to be right in the middle of it if I have anything to do with it.
Yes.
It's on the radar, yes.
So they're at step one, just getting started, just getting planning to see what the feasibility looks like.
All right. Thank you, Naya. We appreciate all of your work, and you as well, Ms. Baker. There has been a lot that we've knocked out over the last 12 months, and both of you have a lot to do with that. So I certainly appreciate it, and I know our residents and all of our stakeholders do as well. So let me try to talk and do other things at the same time. All right, so the first work session item that we have is the council handbook. And I'll pull that up here so folks can see that as we scroll through. Okay, so council handbook was first adopted, I want to say, in early 2022. We've made some revisions to it, and I won't go through the whole document. I'll kind of take you through the highlights about what's changed. So aside from some delightfully beautiful formatting changes rendered by your city clerk, we've gone through and laid out a couple of new sections. And if you'll bear with me as I kind of scroll through here, we made some minor changes to just what sections lived where, just to try to get some greater organization inside the document. But by and large, it recaps what is already in our charter and ordinances, and then includes a couple other provisions here as well that came up sort of through last year, one of which involves proclamations. And if my mouse will cooperate, here we go. Okay, so last year we adopted, or we had a discussion at least, about the proclamation policy for council and the mayor going forward. What's reflected here in this draft is effectively the text of what we discussed last year. We're just incorporating it into the council policy manual so that it's adopted as part of your broader sense about how this process should unfold. In general, there are provisions about how far in advance folks should ask for proclamations, the maximum number that we'll entertain at meetings, which I believe is 3. We'd like to have people accepting them in person. And then at the very end of this, there is a distinction that can be made between a proclamation that is purely mayoral and a proclamation that's reflective of the mayor and the city council as well. So the idea is we'll use whatever language is best and most appropriate for those proclamations as they come up. So just wanted to preview that and let you know there are not a lot of substantive changes to the language there, just making a couple tweaks to incorporate it better. Happy to entertain any discussion about that provision or if anybody wants additional tweaks or adjustments to that. Otherwise, I can press on.
Any questions from council on that?
Okay. Sounds good. So we will leave that for the time being. We have our whole section on meetings, notifications.
I do have a question about that.
Sure, which one?
Special meetings.
Let me get to that section. Yep.
Just like an anecdotal, scroll up just a little bit more. Wait, it
Yeah.
should be
Did I go too far?
page 4.
Here we go.
Just an anecdotal thing. I don't know if we're in a policy of leaving notices at residences anymore. So like, I know that historically the meeting agendas had, like, someone would drive around to deliver them, right? So I don't know if that's something that is historic and that we could, like, think if, like, how that, if it's written in our policy and it's adopted and happens to be a special meeting, like, making sure that we're following the letter of the law. I know that it says, like, 72 hours for us to be notified and 48 hours for the residents to be notified. So, and the notification on page 5 for the residents, I probably was always 72 hours just across the board.
That's going to come out of.
That's the law, isn't it?
Well, yeah, whatever's
Yeah.
in the actual administrative code as far as notification provisions out to the public.
Okay.
And I think that's in Ohio law.
Is
Yeah.
it 72 or 48?
I
for
believe
public
it's,
notice?
well, it should have a citation here.
It says 48.
Usually 48.
Yeah, so that's what's in, if you pull up admin code 10303A,
Okay,
it'll say, it should say 48.
okay.
If we need to make a correction, we will.
Okay, so council has to be notified 72 hours in advance.
Yes.
Public needs to be notified 48 hours in advance.
Yeah, yeah. The idea there is to let you know, hey, we have to have a special meeting, and here's what it's about, and then no fewer than 48 hours in advance, we have to also let the public know, and then go from
And
there.
if there's anything to be addressed, you have that time frame to
Right.
modify.
Right. As far as your question, I guess, about the notification at members' usual place of residence, just to be sure I'm hearing you right.
Yeah.
I took that to mean that, let's say, we're coming up on a 72-hour deadline. I haven't seen you, haven't been able to call you on the phone. I can drop a letter on your door that basically says, hey, Zach, we have to have a special meeting. Call one of us to get the details.
Well, this was all written before we had these.
Well, but
stupid
I don't
things.
mind leaving that in there
Yeah,
just as a
exactly.
just in
Yeah, I
case
think
factor.
yeah.
You never know, something could happen.
Exactly.
Somebody's phone could break, something could happen.
Right.
It
never know.
reads like that should happen every single time.
Right.
Well, it says or, doesn't it?
Does
Does
it?
say
I
or.
think,
It is
on
or.
or, it says or, so I think if it says
Well-
or, right? Am I right?
Where's the or?
Right.
After
Each
person.
Notice-
member or left.
Or left.
Member
Okay,
Or.
served on each member personally, which means you've talked to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, or I met you, called you, talked to you, and
Mm.
said, hey, this is our direct notification that, or if I can't get a hold of you,
Because we
then,
don't want to say
then we'll
and
drop it
or,
on your
because
door.
we said and or, that means.
We technically
you
have to do both.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's only on
What's everybody
special
else's
meetings.
thoughts?
And it would only apply for a special meeting, and we don't tend to call that many special meetings anyway, but just as a clarification, yeah, that's the way I would read it, is that the first effort is to make the direct contact. If that fails, then we go to the or, which is we can put something at your place of residence that says, hey, here's your notice that,
And this hasn't been an issue very recently, but it has been in the past.
gotcha,
When people had call meetings and had not full attendance.
right,
Are you guys okay with leaving that in there,
Sure.
or?
Yes.
Okay,
I
okay.
think that's why it's in there.
yeah.
All right, so we'll move down to the next section. I did make minor revisions in the public participation section, mostly just to clarify, again, for the public, for anybody who should want to show up. And these, Madam Clerk, remind me this gets posted to the website, is that correct? Or I'm
This
sure
is-
we
Yeah,
can.
this has a link on our website under
Okay.
council documents.
Perfect, thank you. So for any member of the public that pulls this document down as well, they also have access to these guidelines. But in general, the guidelines are the same as they've been, but we did make some tweaks to the language so that it reads a little bit better. But the main idea is that folks can come in, 3 minutes to talk. You're not supposed to delegate your time. That 3 minutes can be extended by the presiding officer. But that privilege should be used pretty sparingly, because the point is to keep the meetings moving. And then again, just in here, it kind of addresses disorderly conduct kind of stuff, like you can't come in, throw a temper tantrum, all of that good stuff, so.
So, I'm curious on everybody's thoughts. If we have a agenda item, and the person that agenda item is directly reflecting is here, and what I've seen in the past, which personally I wish could be a little different, is we'd have someone come up, they'd make a comment on an agenda item, we'd hear them out, 0 questions get asked, no back and forth because it's not decorum, and then we vote one way or the other without really much of an explanation, or like giving them a chance to have like discourse with the council. That's one thing that I've always kind of, it's sat with me wrong.
But,
But you've never sat through it.
What do you mean? I've sat through
but,
several votes
but
where I had
that's
to
not,
vote without talking to
I
someone.
don't think that's the purpose of the meeting, though. The purpose is this is a council meeting. They want to have that conversation. That's they can set an appointment or schedule a time to meet with that person, not
Or the department if they.
and hash it out here, right?
When-
I get what you're saying, though, Josh, with that. Like, you want an answer, you want them to provide an answer. Did I call you Josh? You're right. What is my problem? I've been at work all day. I'm
There's a-
sorry.
You're okay.
There's a story
apologize.
behind
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
that you're not the first person.
Sorry. Sorry, it's
You're
been a long
fine.
day.
You're fine.
But no, I get why you're saying that. But I think this is for a meeting to hold business. I don't think it's necessarily for somebody's airing their frustration, but it's not for us to have that air it out in the public.
So let me weigh in. I think the reason for having that comment period is for them to have an opportunity to inform our votes. It is our own discretion whether we provide any clarity on why we eventually landed on our vote. I think it's useful sometimes to provide that clarity, but I don't think we should obligate ourselves to do that every single time.
And am I right in saying it's our discretion if we do want to elaborate further
We can do
or
that.
ask for more information on something, we can do
Chair
that,
can,
correct?
yeah.
Right? So,
And
You
there,
can always hold on the vote. You can always table the subject and get more information.
We've done that
till the
before.
next
yeah.
meeting.
Well, and it might
So-
not necessarily be on a vote either. Somebody
Yeah,
comes in and
or-
just
or
has
whatever
a
the subject is.
concern or issue.
And there's always, anytime anytime a resolution or a ordinance is being passed, there's always a section of discussion after the first and the second and the reading. There's a point of discussion. So if any of us choose to elaborate at that point on why we're voting or why we're not voting, or answer someone's question, you can do it at that point. So there's multitude points of being able to voice our opinion or not
Right.
during.
It's
But-
not
during
so
the
much
situation.
about voicing our opinion, it's if someone's coming up here and we have an agenda item that's directly impacting them, like they are the person, they come up to us, say, this is why you see this on your agenda from my perspective. I'm the person that this is impacting. And they come up, they talk to us for 3 minutes, and then they're over, and then, typically it's been we just take the vote. It's felt, now that you're, like, with this conversation, we're more than capable of asking that person, like, follow-up questions and engaging in a,
Yeah.
like, debate with, not a debate, like a decorum with.
And we have before, there's been circumstances where we've asked questions when somebody's had that. Or I feel like the hope is if it's truly a hot button issue, that person has reached out to one of us or a couple of us beforehand, and we've had that conversation beforehand too, to try to kind of be more informed of that situation as well.
the only, and this is very helpful conversation, I think, for us too, as staff, but the only, I guess, the only seed I'll plant along with all of this is that, at least in my experience in some of the communities that I've been in, you're perfectly within your rights and you have complete discretion to ask a follow-up question or to kind of get into a bit of a back and forth if somebody comes up to the podium for public comment. The way that we drafted this, though, really tries to at least set the baseline at the public comment period, whether that's in a public hearing or whether it's in items not on the agenda, being a way for somebody to come and voice their opinion to you in a way that gets put into the record. And that, as several folks have said, you have a couple different opportunities to respond to that, even if you don't directly. The thing that I would caution you to avoid is if you set a precedent or a standard or a practice where you go back and forth with everybody that comes to the podium, your meetings are going to get really long, and it's going to get really difficult to track how much time has passed of that 3-minute
Right,
allotment.
and that's why,
And having sat in these meetings till 9 and 10 o'clock at night, 11, it's, the way it's handled now is much more efficient.
Well, but I think, personally, I don't think it's all just about efficiency and time. If there's something for concern, I think there's time and place for if there's a need for a conversation, then I think we all have the right to have that conversation.
Right.
But also, we have that right to, like you guys have said, to table it, or if it's a vote, or if we feel that we want to schedule a time to meet with that person at a later date
Well, the
or something like
The
that.
mayor often
Yeah.
passes the concern off to
Or
the
whoever department,
appropriate
yeah,
department,
right,
which
Right.
is
yeah. Or if they feel like the member.
Quick way to handle it.
So-
If they feel, the citizen feels like they're not getting their needs
Right.
met by that department,
They can come back.
then, yeah.
So, two last things here is, one, I'm more specifically not about public comments. I mean, that is not really any concern of mine. It's when somebody has an agenda item, resolution, an ordinance that is directly impacting them. Like,
Mhm.
if it's a resolution, they get there's no public comment or open meeting for the resolutions. That's only on ordinance.
Well, they can always comment on an agenda item.
They can.
There's always that period in the meeting where they
Right.
can do that, yeah.
But so when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I had an issue with my municipality that they were violating Ohio Sunshine Law. Went down to the township office, asked to get put on the agenda, debated with them in an open meeting. Lo and behold, they stopped holding executive sessions before every meeting. That was me as a young child, just engaging in my local government. I feel like that should be a practice that we should have. If someone has a concern, they want to bring something to us, they could reach out in advance to the city manager, council clerk, and say, I would like to get put on the agenda for this specific reason. It's set out, we keep, the mayor has discretion on how long that conversation's gonna go, or if it's taking too long, or if it's getting out of hand. But I want to be able to make sure that we're not coming off with an impetus of looking that we're squashing the quorum.
So, can I respond?
They can't do that now?
Allow me to respond. We have strategies that we could deploy to direct their participation with us. As we discussed, having those one-on-one conversations, or, scheduling an appointment, whatever we want to encourage as to be that vehicle for those extended conversations. We could, when we announce the agenda, maybe have a sentence that kind of helps with that, or maybe even better would, on the agenda form, if we just, had a statement on there that kind of, this is for you to make a statement, but if you want to have an extended conversation, we encourage you to use this method. That's something that we can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be in our council
Yeah.
handbook, but that's
Yeah.
something that could help.
Right.
But to your point, with our agenda, you could have brought your subject to us under the
Other-
non-agenda items at any time.
Then I'm limited to 3 minutes with no, really give or take question and
Well,
answer.
you've got 3 minutes to state your concern.
Position.
And then if there's give and take, there's give and take.
Mhm.
That's up to us.
Call the
That's
chair.
up to council.
Mhm. And
Or
even,
it's up to us to have you.
and when you, and when you present it to your,
We have that.
your local
in our-
municipality, they didn't have to engage with you when you present it to them. They chose to at that point in time.
Right.
So it's the same concept.
I was put on the agenda. The council was given, or the township administration was given notice, why is this person coming to talk to me? And it's set on the agenda, so it's not like someone comes out of the blue with something that we've had no research on.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there is items that people are coming in front of us for where we've had research on, and we can engage in an informed discussion that, I don't know.
No, I understand.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I want to be sensitive to our time. I think maybe if you and I connect, after the meeting, we can brainstorm some solutions for how to cross a bridge here. But I think by and large, there's nothing in the policy manual now that prohibits or precludes the kind of interaction that you're talking about, because you're still within your rights to.
Well, whether it's that or whether it's the J.C.'s ask for 10 minutes to make a presentation.
Sure, yep.
It's no different. And they do, the Lions and the J.C.'s and other organizations do that on a regular basis.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's not I don't think we're stopping that from happening.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure, because the handbook reads a little strict with you have 3 minutes. It should be on very sparing occasions that you exceed these 3 minutes.
Right.
Giving the chair, instructions on, try to keep it to 3 minutes unless there's some exigent circumstance.
Right.
So that's why I want to make sure that I had this discussion, that we're not squashing public decorum in meetings.
No, yeah, the chair always has prerogative, so.
We didn't used to have a 3-minute.
So I do want to kind of move us along. There are two other sections that I want to cover here in the time that we have. So the first is the appointment process, or an appointment process for boards and commissions. So this has been, we've done a number of things, I would say, since I first started a couple of years ago. Naya and her team put some time into trying to do some homework with other municipalities to see what process they follow when they're making appointments for boards and commissions. So what's laid out here effectively counts back from the date that somebody's appointment to a board or commission expires. And what's presented here is the same kinds of milestones that other communities have adopted, and generally the same process steps that a lot of folks use, is you call it a best practice, in order to vet candidates and then make appointments. So, assuming we move in this direction, what this would mean is that about 100 days prior to somebody's appointment expiring, we would go ahead and post that out onto the website and sort of cast the net. Now, we've run postings for vacancies for boards and commissions pretty much constantly since I started. For anybody that's watching, if you're interested, you can apply, call us, visit the website. We are always taking volunteers. But once that's been posted, we would allow 10 days for the word to get out and then start accepting applications for a position. Once those applications come in, the idea is that staff will review the applications and then interview candidates on a first-come, first-served basis. So if let's say we have one position, appointment position that we need to fill, we get an applicant, that person gets reviewed by whoever the staff liaison is for that board or commission. If they feel or they look on paper like a good fit, the staff will interview them, and we will conduct that interview period. We'll hold the whole thing open, so we'll keep accepting applications up until 45 days before that application period closes. If we have more than one applicant and more than one qualified applicant after an interview, then staff would compile all of those as a resource then to take to the next step. So a month before, or 30 days before that appointment actually expires, that's the cutoff date for interviews, staff will look at the portfolio of candidates they have and make a recommendation as to a finalist that they would, or finalists that they would recommend to council. And then at that point, it would be up to me to schedule an executive session at the next practical meeting for us to talk about all those finalists and then the staff's recommendation for who emerged as what staff thinks is the best fit for that process. And then the idea is that as long as council agrees, after kind of reviewing the candidates and their qualifications, if council agrees, we would come out of executive session and look for a motion to issue a letter of appointment. If you prefer another step in that process following the executive session, you'd make a motion to do whatever would be appropriate next, to extend the application period or go fish again, if you will. But the idea here is that your hands as council aren't tied. But what we're trying to do is get a better sense of funneling these applicants in and putting everybody through a process that is the same regardless of whatever board and commission you're applying for, and then arriving at a consistent process for making these recommendations at the end.
Let's hope the folders are full.
Yes, ma'am, we need them, but
So what would happen if at the application period closure mark, the 45-day mark, there are not enough applications for the openings?
so in other words, if we're kind of like right now, where we have an application period, it's closed, and we don't have any applicants.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know that we addressed that specifically in this draft document. But I mean, the idea is, let me see if we did put we have a calendar in here. Yes. So if we don't have a suitable candidate, we hold the vacancy open and then repost and start to,
All over again.
start to
So-
go through the process again.
So at that 45-day mark, it would not close. We would repost, it would remain open until such time as we had enough, or we would extend for a period of time?
No, that's a great point. I think that the way that this was drafted and the way I had been thinking about it, if we get one applicant, but we're trying to fill 3 positions, we will still vet that one applicant and interview, and if they're a good fit, try to take them to council as quickly as possible,
Okay.
rather than wait for the whole pool to fill up. And I'm happy to add a little bit of clarification language in there.
That would be helpful.
If that's helpful. Okay, cool. We will do that. Make a note.
I mean, yeah, the last sentence, I guess, applications conducted on a rolling basis. So
Yep.
that means just like, we'll keep looking for people until someone.
Yeah, but I can add
Wordsmith.
wordsmith it, plus it up a little bit, just so that we're clear that if we do get any qualified candidate, they will be taken to council, and we'll keep the remainder open for any other remaining seats. Okay. Any other questions, comments about that section? All right, the last one, I keep using the wrong mouse. The last one that I have for you this evening has to do with donations. So the city's, the narrative here kind of explains some of it too, but historically, as a council, the council has made modest donations to third-party organizations. What we're looking to do here is provide a little bit of guidance about how those donations happen, and if somebody requests a donation, what if any, process should be followed pursuant to that request. So the main idea here is that anytime the council is making a donation or cutting a check really for anything, there needs to be some sort of legislative support for that. So if you make a donation, you have to have a corresponding resolution in order to do that. Like, it can't just be a motion, it's got to be more formal, actual legislation. And the idea is that at least, where did I write it in here? Okay, yes, here we go. So the idea is that for any and all donations, we will talk about those at work sessions. So on a night like tonight, X organization has asked for a donation. If no one has objections, I'll put a resolution on the agenda. We sort of move forward from there, but that's the opportunity to discuss the donation request in public. And then if we get a new request for donations, we can bring that up and discuss it at a work session, or talk about it as part of the agenda setting process and make a determination about whether there's consensus among council, whether this is a good idea. So effectively, the way that I would anticipate proceeding with this, assuming we adopt this language, would be, I actually was going to start tonight, so I can give you a bit of a preview about who we've historically made donations to, and then just kind of take a temperature check with you. If you feel that that level of donation to those organizations is comfortable, and that's all you want to do donation-wise this year, then I've got the direction I need. If we get more donation requests, I can say, we've budgeted X, council's discussed donations for the year, we're not inclined to do more donations, and I can hold off on additional donations. Or if new requests come in and you want to hear about them, I can bring them to you at a future work session. But the idea there is that it basically puts the process step on, somebody needs to come to staff and ask, and then based on the direction that we've gotten from you, we'll say, okay, well, we'll talk about it at another work session, or what's budgeted is what's budgeted, and that's all we have for the year, and then carry the conversation forward from there. Does that make sense? I feel like
Makes sense. I don't think that I am real happy with closing the door.
okay,
Things come up in the community with veterans and whatever that we don't know about the first of the year when we do the budget. So, but I think if we're gonna put a process like this in place, then we need to take the time to send them a piece of paper, a letter to their presidents or whatever, and make them aware of what they need to do by certain such date. If everything's gonna be determined by the budget, which it ought to be, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, then we need to let those organizations that historically have been supported, we need to let them know of any changes that we're making.
Well, and I should add here too, that, and that's an excellent point, and what I should add and clarify here is that the way this is drafted, there's not necessarily a process that an outside party needs to do to come ask. And part of that is deliberate, because we don't necessarily have a program where we're providing subsidies sort of en masse to applicants. It's not like
Right.
we have $50,000 and it's sort of first come, first served. Really, at the end of the day, whether or not to give an organization a donation is within your purview as a city council. It's a pure policy privilege that you have to make a decision about, we're going to give an organization a certain amount of money for a specific purpose. So the idea is that if a new donation is going to occur, the place to bring that up is in exactly this context at a work session. So if a member of the community comes to you and says, hey, I'd love it if the city gave our organization a donation for X, Y, and Z, that organization doesn't need to do anything. It's on council, or if that request comes to staff, then it's on us to bring that to you at a work session to say, hey, this request was made. Are you willing to entertain it? What does everybody think? And that way, we're not creating an application process for third parties to come try to apply for money from the city.
That's the way it's worked always anyway.
Right.
I think this kind of begs a bigger question of us at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year, having a work session about our budget, period. Because we know that there's 4, 5, 6 different charities that we donate to on, like, every year since I've been here. So we can probably count our pennies and say that, like, okay, we're gonna have that, we can budget for something that we can assume that we're gonna get. They don't end up coming, we have reserve.
That's happened before.
And then, I'm sure it's somewhere on our line for a discretionary budget, and then that's where those one-off situations would come in, and then that would follow this policy. So,
Because there's some things that I hope will come back that have gone away, that the city has supported in the past, in our parks and whatever. So I would hate to close the door first of the year saying that's all there is and, you know.
I mean, and that's where, like, the discretionary piece
Right,
comes in.
exactly.
But I think we should have that conversation on at the end of the year, when we're looking into the next years for the council budget, because that's the one department that we run, like, solely in the city, is how
Right.
much we're gonna spend on what? How much uniform allowances are we gonna get, travel, et cetera.
Right.
We can have that discretionary conversation, and, like, we know that the Bob Chili's Golf Classic, the 3 other donations that we're gonna make during the year.
Yep,
we can
Fisher
look at-
Nightingale, Hometown Holiday, and Mad River Lions.
We can look at that at the end of the year and say, hey, we're gonna budget for these 4 these 4 expenses and this, and then we can kind of take a look line by line of our budget and have a good understanding of what all it takes to fund us. The only other thing I'd have in here, and questions for the rest of council, is would we want to set a provision that the organization we're donating to would need to be a 501c3? Like, set that clarity out there.
It's totally up to you. I mean, to me, this is an area, I'll give my unsolicited opinion. I know you asked council, but to me, this is one of those areas where the more specific you are in your policy, potentially the more limited you are in what you may be able to do in the future. So,
The only thing I would like to see is some sort of not to exceed budget. So if we average $1,000 a year, I don't want us budgeting $5,000 a year for donations, and we come down to Christmas and we go, oh, well, we got, $4,000 to give away, so we're gonna give it all to the Lion. Yeah, I don't wanna see it. I wanna see that, we average $1,000 a year, so we're gonna put our budget at $1,500 or whatever, and we can always change that during the year, but I would not want somebody to see that, oh, they have this amount in donations, so they can give us, and think they can come in and get it.
I would recommend that we only budget what we have historically received in the past, and that is it. The rest falls into discretionary line item. whatever we have remaining.
Well,
in the
I don't
fund
want to
balance.
see that, I'm saying there's no discretionary line item.
I mean,
Okay?
that's for.
If we give away $1,000 a year, we set the line item at, okay, well, we may get 2 extra this year, so we set it at 1,500. If we don't spend it, then it's money.
Well, and I should jump in here, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to say, just specifically, is there a specific amount that was put aside?
That's exactly where I was going. So we did take a slightly different approach with the budget this year. So we created a line item called Public Function Support. And the donations that council's historically made, we budgeted for in that line item. But that line item is deliberately titled in a very generic way because public function support means a lot of different things. So it could mean a donation. It could also mean, I know historically council tends to attend the MVRPC annual dinner or any other sort of public engagement meeting, event, whatever that requires or where you would like to participate. That money could also come out of that line item. The idea is not to tie anybody's hands on a specific dollar amount or anything else, but basically just to say, we're budgeting this much for all of these general public support tasks. And specifically to answer your question, this year that line item has $1,500 in it. And after we account for the historical donations the council has made, there's about $650 left. So at this point, where we would stand is just to wrap it all up in a pretty bow. So if council were to adopt the handbook and were to start living by this policy, what that would basically mean is if another organization came to you or came to staff and said, hey, I'm interested in applying for a donation, I'd say, okay, we would probably talk about it at a work session, and at that work session, I would let you know, this organization is asked, this is what they say they're going to use it for. We could invite them to make a presentation, potentially, and that as far as what we've budgeted so far, X number of dollars remains in your line item, but remember, these other expenses may come down the line as well. So that's kind of how we would handle it going forward, I'd imagine.
And I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, well, thank you again for bearing with me through that document. I promise the other items on tonight's agenda are not quite that
Can I ask,
meaty.
as far as the council handbook, everybody good with the handbook, putting it on the agenda for approval minus the minor changes that Josh is going to make there for next week? Okay.
Okay, so then I'll make those adjustments. I'll get you all an updated copy, and we'll plan on having that at the agenda for next week. Okay.
That's
Can,
just a resolution, right?
yep, just a resolution. All right. I got that. Okay. All right, so next, the Charter Review Commission process. So let me pull up another exhibit here. All right, so just so everyone knows, I know we probably had some prior discussion about this as well. Section 1304 of our charter discusses, amendments to the charter, how those need to go out to a vote and everything else. There's a provision of the charter that says that we are supposed to conduct a charter review every 5 years. That 5 years should consist of a commission of 9 electors of the municipality, and that the commission should review the charter and make recommendations as it sees fit, and that a report is due by, I want to say July 1, yes. We've had this advertised, Madam Clerk, for how long? Couple months? A while.
A while.
For quite a while. Mr. Dan Tieford actually expressed some interest, and I think is trying to rustle the bushes and see if anybody else is interested in a charter review commission. We also talked with our attorneys, because one of the questions that we had was, even if we get a handful of people, but we don't get 9, could we even still do this? And the long and short of it is, there's not a penalty if we don't do it. So it's kind of up to us as far as how to proceed if we don't get enough people that want to volunteer for Charter Review Commission. So in that spirit, I wanted to, bring this to your attention, just to let you know, kind of here's where we are. We have a handful. If we're able to gather a few more, I think that would be good. I don't know that we'll get to 9 or get to 9 in time to meet this July 1 provision. So my recommendation would be to basically take whoever expresses some interest and hold at least one, preferably 2 or 3 meetings with that group and say, here are the ideas for charter changes that staff had, what ideas do you have? And we'll basically run a charter review commission with whoever we get. And that by July 1, we would take whatever comes out of that process, and staff will help those folks pull together a report that says, here's what we're recommending in terms of charter changes.
That has to go on the ballot.
Well, yeah, they will make recommendations, and then you can
Council,
select
yeah.
which ones, right? If you'd approve each initiative or reject it in order to put it on the ballot. As long as that approach sounds reasonable to everybody, we'll follow that. I'll tell you up front, though, that I think one of the recommendations that we were batting around the office was
Change it to 10 years.
change to 10 years. 5 is a lot for a charter review, in my opinion. It's just a lot for a charter review commission, especially when you can change the charter practically at any time. Or at least a charter amendment can come up at any time, and it would go on the next election if you vote for it. In other words, we don't have to wait for a charter review period to change the charter. So a 10-year period gives a little bit more time in between having to corral a lot of folks to go through this process. But in addition to that, we would bring forward whatever comes out of the conversations we have with whoever's
Well, I
interested.
have to say, the last review did result in 4 issues going on the ballot, and some were passed, so people are paying attention.
Mhm. No, and I think the spirit here is good. Like we want to be able to look at that document and make recommendations and try, especially as the world around us changes, and try to live into our role as the city more effectively. So it is good to do a charter review process. We're trying to balance that against the ability to find people and run the process that we've outlined in our own charter, so. Any other comments, questions on charter review? Okay. Next item, we get to change it up. Ms. Holtz has some items for us about a tax incentive request, and I'll turn it over to her.
Yes. So the CRA Housing Council made a recommendation to grant this tax exemption for the Redwood project. They are asking for a 50% tax exemption for a period of 15 years. This is in the Fairborn School District, so that's just some things to let you know about this request. For those who may recall, this is a 90-unit development at 7455 Union Schoolhouse Road. You will recall there was a lot of people who were interested in this, so you may see some other people interested in this when it comes for you. But that's pretty much the gist of this request.
It would be an ordinance, so it would have, assuming that there's no serious objection here this evening, I think our plan would be to slate that so that it would come for a first reading at the next meeting next week, and then a second reading and public hearing on February 1.
How many years?
15,
Is this like a TIF, or is this?
yes.
It's very similar.
Mhm.
Yep.
And this is the Fairborn School District, correct?
That's correct. Mhm.
Okay.
Do they have to approve it?
No,
They do not, no.
Because it's not 30 years.
It was because not
over
more than
Oh, okay.
75%.
percentage.
Yep.
Yep. So as far as incentive requests go, just for what it's worth, for my 2 cents, it is in line with, I would say, what a typical incentive request is. It's not the sun, moon, and stars, 30 years at 100% or something like that. So at any rate, I think staff feels comfortable with the request. The Housing Council felt comfortable with it. And so just to give you a heads up that that'll be on the agenda for next meeting.
And this, in the Housing Council was unanimous?
That's right. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody, any other thoughts, questions?
Can I have,
Right.
can I say something really quick?
Sure.
I'm on that council. I also voted yes. One of the big reasons is, even though they're having their tax offset, they'll be maintaining their own internal roads, which is a big benefit for us.
How common is that?
I'm
That-
sorry? How
These-
common?
Mhm.
So a lot of these new developments want to build the roads and then put them off on the city. So this is really a good boon
Slam
for
dunk.
us, yeah.
And they pay for it through the HOAs.
Yes. They're also going to be investing about 1.3 million in infrastructure in that area, widening Union Schoolhouse, so there's going to be some other benefits to the city as well.
Brenda, did you have?
Well, I question why they need incentive. You know, my general philosophy when it comes to incentives is incentives are where we want to invest, grow. That particular part of the city is that it's kind of on the edge. And that's not necessarily where I would want to put our incentive dollars as opposed to something that is more an area where we're trying to concentrate growth in. So I don't know if it may be just a rhetorical thing. I think I might need some convincing that that's where we want to spend our incentive.
I'm happy to
not
share the
spending-
report that they sent. Oh.
Yeah, it's because it's a CRA functions kind of like a TIF, where what'll happen is the extra property tax value that's accumulated, a percentage of that is what is actually the incentive. So we're not out of pocket necessarily for any dollars. We will lose a proportion of.
That's the money that I'm referring
Right,
to.
and that's fair. That's a fair point. My only, I guess the only thing I would think about, though, is that, kind of to Ms. Holt's point, the developer is committed to make some significant infrastructure investments in that area. I believe they're going to widen the road.
Yes.
And they're also moving a stormwater
Yes, they
pipe.
are. And they're also working to mitigate some wet fields and make sure that's protected, some wetlands, excuse me. So that's part of also what's going into this. And so the total investment into this site is over 20 million.
Right. So the idea is the developer is going to put a substantial amount of money, not just into their development, but into the public infrastructure that will benefit not just that development, but the community as a whole. So that's part of the rationale for why you see these incentive requests more and more often. And what I would say is, for my part, I don't intend you to bring incentive requests for which we don't get a benefit. If a developer comes to us and says, I just want a handout, I want to see proof in the pudding as well, you know? So in this case, staff felt like the value of the public goods that are being installed are commensurate with the incentive that was asked for. And so that's where the recommendation came out.
And-
The fact that we won't have to take care of the roads.
And are these public goods that we would have wanted anyway?
Well,
Part of Union School it would have taken more time for that to be widened. So this is happening much sooner than the service department would have planned had we done it ourselves.
Is our eventual goal to have Union
Yes,
Schoolhouse
it was.
widened?
Mhm.
it's in the land use plan.
Okay.
This is an area that calls for this kind of investment, yes.
That sold me. Thank you.
And housing is a positive thing right now.
Is there a way we can
Well,
get?
from what?
Oh, absolutely. The meeting this morning was, it's all about this area with the growth of population. Housing is very scarce. And so I'm sure that they're not going to have any trouble, and we're going to get income tax.
And somebody that lives over right there, it will be nice to see that a little bit wider out there. And
I live there too.
do you? I didn't realize you lived over that way.
Yeah, but I am closer to, I don't have as much of Union Schoolhouse
Oh,
to travel.
I'm right there.
I'm close to the end.
Is there a way we can just get an anecdotal approximation of what that would look like over 15 years?
As far as what it would cost the city to install that infrastructure?
No, like what we're like.
Losing?
Oh, you mean the value of the incentive?
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, we can work on that.
I mean, if it's like super difficult, I mean,
We can work on that. We can work on that. The asterisk there is that it
Very high.
depends on what it ultimately gets valued at. And so
Right.
we are shooting a little bit in the dark as far as what the projected,
And what the.
Valuation will
what
be,
the-
but-
What happens in 15 years?
right.
Yeah.
We don't know.
But that's a fair question, and yeah, we can certainly work on pulling a bit of a projection together and get it to you.
Yeah.
So,
Just the hard facts of like cost to maintain roads, cost to have infrastructure, cost of whatever the city would incur if we did it ourselves versus what the net loss would be over 15 years cumulative, with a big bunch of asterisks that it's estimated.
right. Yep, we can work on that.
Obviously, the project's already in motion. What would happen if the city would say, no, we don't want to do that incentive?
I don't know
I
if the
mean-
developer was.
I mean, I know it'd be a good faith thing, and, with them, working on the infrastructure of the area, but, like, has that traditionally ever happened?
Happened here?
Not necessarily here. I know it's happened elsewhere, but.
Yeah. No, I don't know if you've had a conversation
Yes,
with the
so
developer.
Part of the application for them to apply for that CRA grant was for them to submit a report where this money is actually going to. So this will support most of the work they're doing with the infrastructure, moving that sewer pipe, and also working with the wetland. So that would be a financial difficulty for them to do that, and that would probably put a really big, I'll say, hold up on their project.
Sure.
If it does move forward at all. This is one of their smaller projects. They like to see at least more acreage than what we have. So they're really taking a chance on Riverside.
Yeah, and a lot of times, without getting like crazy in the weeds, these sorts of incentives are the kind that get paid out, over that 15, 10, 30-year period, depending on whatever gets negotiated. A lot of times, what a developer will do is use that when they're planning out the capital they have to put into the project up front versus how they're going to be paid back, over the back end. That's kind of where this incentive math comes into play, and that comes also not just into their own books, but how their conversations with banks and other financing agencies as well. So if they're able to go to their source of capital or their bank and say, I have this incentive, I have this agreement, I have this plan, we've run all these numbers, it's safe for you to invest, then that's when the funding kind of opens up for these projects, so. All right, well, we will have that prepped for you at the next council meeting. That'll be next week. And just two more quick items here. The first is the Investment Review Committee. I know we had a couple questions about this, and I'll pull it up here as well so folks can see. This came to our attention actually recently as we were going through the board and commission review process. And I believe we last appointed April Franklin to the Investment Review Committee when she was on, and that was, maybe 2022? I don't know that we made an appointment last year to it. So we did a little bit of homework. What you're looking at here in section 125.01 of our codified ordinances is an ordinance discussing the adoption of an investment policy. What I really wanted to share with you this evening is that the investment policy is what calls for the Investment Review Committee. To me, there are two challenges here. One is practical and one is technical. The technical challenge is what's in front of you. If you actually read this text, it is not the language of the ordinance that should have been passed. This is like the cover. In other words, when we pass an ordinance, we have the legislation and then we have an exhibit behind it. And the exhibit is what goes into the city code. That didn't happen here. So that it's a minor hiccup. But it is one of these things where all of that language is not available and hasn't been, as far as I know, on our website for quite some time. If you go pull the actual investment policy, so this again is from 2006. We're going on 20 years with this investment policy. This section 3 down here at the bottom is what calls for the Investment Review Committee, which is the city manager, law director, finance director, and a member of council. My recommendation to you is, given the technical hiccup with how this was codified, but also the fact that, these policies are going on 20 years old, I'm happy to send you the policies. A lot of what they discuss are, sort of the investment objectives of the city and some guidelines about making prudent investments, where the city's portfolio should be invested. These are all appropriate things to think about in terms of an investment policy. What I'll say, though, is that at least as far as I know, and since I've been here, the city hasn't been invested in very much aside from its usual checking account. The state of Ohio has an excellent program that Ms. Baker did a very commendable job of getting us plugged into, called the Star Ohio Treasury Program. It's liquid, meaning we can pull our money in and out at any time. We're not making commitments. It also pays very competitively with respect to interest. And there is, I would say, a fairly significant amount of overlap between laws that are already on the books and what this investment policy calls for. Because it's not like, even if this investment policy didn't exist, there are guide rails. The ORC has guide rails about how we can spend our money. There are professional and ethical guidelines about how we can spend our money. All this is to say, I'd like to bring in an ordinance that repeals this so that we can revisit it and start over, unless you have serious objections to that.
As of the last finance packet, we now see how much money we have in the bank and how much money is invested. Ms. Baker, how much did we get in interest in December?
41,000
$41,000.
plus, yeah. In November, it was $460.
So over the course of however long, $40,000 a month is what we could have been getting. So, I mean, as long as we have the money in front of us.
To be fair, the interest rates that we're earning on these highly liquid
Oh,
monies
yeah.
are up because COVID. So in 2020, those kind of skyrocketed. But we're still, 5.5% return, which is really good.
Yeah.
So I commend,
And that's backed by the state of Ohio's treasury.
thank you for that. So as long as we were able to see it, see what we have, I think that would be weird for us to have like a board trying to pick funds because we can't really even do that, period.
Well, and to be clear, and just to add to that, it is a best practice, and it is something that eventually we should include in our budget document every year. This one that I'm working on as well. We're going to keep growing that. Usually you have a section in there that discusses your financial policies. But to your point, I don't know that those have to be like legislatively adopted every time there's a minor change. You in effect do that when you approve the budget. So that's kind of where I'd like to drive us, is to repeal this as a separate thing off of the books, and it becomes something that we incorporate into a much more robust process when it comes time to budgeting. So not hearing any objections, I think that's good direction for me. We'll kind of move that way. The final thing I have for you is just more of a heads up. I don't really have an exhibit with this. But as many of you know, when we applied for the Safe Streets for All grant, which is going to allow us to look at the entire Woodman corridor from Springfield Street south to 35. When we made that grant application, we told the federal government that we would put together a task force to help manage who would be basically that entire process, that entire review process. And the task force consists, what we said in the grant application was that it would be myself, the mayor, the public service director, and then we named a couple third-party organizations that would stand out. So one is the Transportation Improvement District. RTA has agreed to participate. Mr. Wayne at the school has agreed to participate. I think I mentioned last meeting, we're still looking for a member of the public who is living with a disability, or several members who can participate, just to lend that perspective. We also told the federal government that we would pass a resolution that says we agree this is a great idea and that this task force should be created, and we support what comes out of it. So I will have that resolution for you. It'll also be in your packet. It's a bit of housekeeping, but I do think it's appropriate to do a little bit of cheerleading, because I'll remind folks, we had the second highest SS4A grant award in the state last year and the highest for action planning. So it is a big deal, and this is exactly the kind of thing that will help us transform that corridor for the better for decades to come. So that's all I have on that, unless you have any other questions. All right, and then just to wrap up, as far as managers' updates, a couple other housekeeping items will be on the agenda next week. We did, Ms. Bartlett, to her credit, put applications in for CDBG and solid waste grants that we will use to upgrade the parks. So we have 2 resolutions authorizing us to accept those grants. I'll probably bring a couple more resolutions to you in a couple months, because the equipment is going to be north of $25,000 once we order it. So I'll need you to approve the ordering of it. But for now, we're just accepting the grant. City Hall's closed Monday. City offices are closed Monday in observance of Martin Luther King Day. And that is all I have, unless you have anything for me.
Are you sure?
Move to adjourn.
Well, oh, no.
Oh, eh?
Well, no.
I'm sorry, you have a comment.
So-
Go ahead.
Mayor Williams usually starts this way, so
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
start
ahead,
on that
no, I'm gonna, let's go
Well,
ahead
he
and start.
started on this end
No,
last
well, I'm starting that in, I'm putting you on the
All right.
spot.
Well, to Zach's point, if I run the numbers right, that's close to $500,000 a year if we hold it to $40,000 a month in interest. And even if we lowered that, because this is a super high rate, even if we said it's only $20,000 a month, that's still $240,000 a year that we will have in interest. Are we gonna be able to, we're gonna have to put that in our budget now.
Well, ideally, yes. I mean, that becomes part of the calculus
Yeah.
in budget processes going forward.
$200,000 is 2 more employees in whichever department we may or may not need them.
Right. We are still in an operating deficit. I will,
know,
you know,
and
but
I
you are
appreciate
correct.
that.
Yes,
But
it is
to my
extra money,
point-
so.
to My point, Kim, thank you very much, for, I mean, that's, I mean, that pays her wages for the year easily.
Mhm.
Not a bonus.
It pays the entire finance department's
That's
wages.
right. So this is you've paid for yourself this year, if this interest rate holds.
Look out next
holds
year.
true.
Right, until interest falls back to 1%, then we're going to talk.
Thank you very much. No, I want to say thank you for everything you've done, and your presentation was awesome, and thank you. That's all I got. Sorry.
You're fine. I have nothing.
Well, just say thanks to the law enforcement folks that work for us, that do their job every day. The law enforcement day was Tuesday? Anyway, this week. But their job is really difficult, and I wouldn't want my husband or my children to go out on the street and do what they do. So I really respect them. And the fire department does a great job too, but this is Law Enforcement Week, so I say thank you. I was gonna wait and do that next week, but it's weird.
I wholeheartedly second what Ms. Sarah said, and I have nothing further as well.
Oh, no, you've gotta have more than that now.
Just taking it all in.
Okay. Now, first I want to thank Mayor Williams for putting me on the spot for the very first, meeting as deputy mayor to have me run it, so thank you. But I do want to thank, obviously, law enforcement, all of our departments, everybody does such an amazing job. You two have done amazing. You make him look good, so he needs
That's
to be
a fact.
thanking you tremendously. So, but yeah, I mean, kudos, great presentations, awesome job. Thank you, and that's it.
You don't have to take a motion, you just adjourn the meeting.
Okay, well, in that case, we are going to adjourn the meeting tonight at 7:18.
Yep.
Do you have the